You know, Schleck Daddy, Jeff Shiegel, like many people, I've been enjoying your little videos you've been doing throughout the past few months. The past month or so. I've enjoyed what you've done in November, and I've enjoyed what you're doing here. I've enjoyed your holiday humbug videos, and I've enjoyed your 12 Days of Christmas. Now, I recently watched your new one that you posted late last night, earlier today, and that is the 8 wrestlers you feel that the 8 wrestlers that should have been WWE champion for even just a brief moment. And you bring up a good list. There's no doubt about it. All the names of the individuals you've listed potentially should have had a run, briefly, transitional, or whatever, with that belt. But there are some names that I noticed that you did leave off. And you probably have your reasons for leaving them off, and that's okay. That's okay. You want to leave them off? Fine. That is no problem. That is no problem. But there are a few listings that I want to talk about. Let's first of all talk about one individual. Let's talk about the Superfly. That's right, Jimmy Snuka. Superfly Jimmy Snuka, who was probably more over than anybody in the WWE, even when Hulk Hogan arrived on the scene and Hulkamania was taken off. Here you had Jimmy Superfly Snuka, who known for having one of the most memorable moments in Madison Square Garden by leaping off the top of the cage onto the magnificent Morocco for the Intercontinental Championship. And yet, this guy is so over, and he has such a memorable moment that it's still talked about, and it's still shown even to this day that WWE couldn't even say, hey, let's put the belt on Jimmy Superfly Snuka. They couldn't do that, even for a brief moment. You know, have Iron Sheik beat Bob Backlund like he did, and then maybe briefly lose the belt to Jimmy and then regain it, and then lose it to Hogan. You couldn't do that. You couldn't let Jimmy Superfly Snuka have one little reign, transitional reign, if you will, with this belt. You couldn't do that. I'm still surprised by that. The fact that the guy was one of the most over guys you had, and yet you couldn't give him a run with this. Surprising. Surprising. Another guy that I believe should have had a run with this WWE Championship, believe it or not, is the guy that had the most classic and probably had the classic WrestleMania match of all time, Randy Savage, and that is Ricky the Dragon Steamboat. Again, just like Snuka, you couldn't give this guy at least a brief, if not transitional run with this. I mean, you have him in, I don't know what it was, a Madison Square Garden in a MSG network or a Coliseum video exclusive match. You had him teaming up with Hulk Hogan of all people, and yet you couldn't give him a run with this belt. Ricky the Dragon Steamboat, who, mind you, just like Booker T and Ron Simmons and Vader that Jeff mentioned in his video, had held the WCW belt. Well, mainly when it was known still as the NWA belt, but you get the idea. The WCW NWA World title, and you couldn't give him a run with this? Even when you brought him back and gave him the push that you did before you shafted him, to the point that you basically took him off of Hacksaw Jim Duggan's Survivor Series team because he left because you shafted him, and replaced him with Sergeant Slaughter, a good replacement. But even in his second run with your company, you couldn't give him a run with this, even though you were pushing him? Come on, WWE. You guys, they couldn't do that? Even briefly or transitional, they couldn't do that? Again, like Jimmy Snuka, that kind of surprises me. And then there's another guy that surprises me that didn't get a run with his belt. I know you guys are going to flip by this, but the American Dream, that's the Rhodes, baby. I can't believe they didn't give the Dream a run with his belt. I mean, what is it? I mean, what is it with them? Just because, I mean, what is the WWE's problem? Just because these guys that I mentioned, well, at least two of them that I mentioned, you know, Ricky and now Dusty, just because they held the opposition's world title, the opposing company's world title, you're not going to give them a run with your championship? What kind of BS is that? What kind of BS is that? I mean, come on, Dusty Rhodes, the American Dream, baby, son of a plumber. You can't even give him a run with his belt. You can't even give him a brief run with this belt. Surprising. It's really, really surprising that you couldn't give someone that the fans backed up, the fans popped for anytime the American Dream music came on. You couldn't give him a shot at this. You couldn't give him a run with this. Again, just like the other two, I'm kind of surprised by that. Another person I'm kind of surprised that didn't get a run with this belt, and he was with the company for 2 years or so, and he was very popular. Anytime his music started, anytime you heard the, you know, anytime you heard that tornado sound, yeah, you know who I'm talking about. You couldn't give him a run. Yeah, he committed suicide about a few years later. Fine. You know, that was stupid on his part and everything. But still, you couldn't give the Texas Tornado, Kerry Von Erich, Kerry Von Erich, if you will, you couldn't give the Texas Tornado a run with this belt. You couldn't do that. You couldn't give the Texas Tornado a run with the WWE Championship, even just briefly. Well, why was it? What? Because he was the world-class champion? You didn't even consider world-class in the same league as NWA, WCW, and yet WWE, you don't give Texas Tornado a run just briefly, transitionally with the WWE title, especially when you know he's really over with your crowd? I mean, come on. Come on, WWE, get with it. And then, you want to talk about somebody as we got into the new generation that should have had a run with this belt. That should have had a run. Well, before we get to the new generation, I got one more name I think should have had a run with this belt. One more name, and that is Big Boss Man. Heel or not, heel or babyface, he should have had one of those times in his career. He should have had a run with this belt. Heel or babyface, he should have had a run during the Hogan Warrior era with this belt. He should at least have had one transitional brief run with this belt. Especially when you turned him babyface and you had the people getting behind him and you gave him that momentum. You should have at least given him a shot and a run with this, even if it was briefly or transitional. I mean, imagine how the crowd would have popped. And then imagine how better the storyline would have been if you would have had the Boss Man as WWF champion and you had Hogan and Savage chasing him. I mean, how much better would the storyline between the Mega Powers and the Twin Towers, how much better that would have been? I'm just saying, you had multiple opportunities. Even when you brought him back during the Attitude Era, you had multiple opportunities. And yet you didn't do it. You did not do it. It still surprises me. And then as we get into the new generation, there's one name that really sticks out. One name that really sticks out to me as somebody that should have at least had a run with this. I mean, heck, you featured him in the freaking main event of Survivor Series 92. You gave him a shot of it in the semi-main event of Royal Rumble. You had him go over former WWE champion Bob Backlund at WrestleMania 9. And of course I'm talking about Razor Ramon, Scott Hall. As Razor Ramon, you couldn't even give him a run with the belt, either as a heel or as a babyface. I mean, as a babyface, he was hotter than anything at times. The crowd popped for him anytime they heard his music. And yet you couldn't give Scott Hall, as Razor Ramon, a run with this? You couldn't do that? I mean, come on, folks. Come on, WWE. What was your business sense? I mean, here's your guy that's oozy machismo. And yet you couldn't even give him, and the fans are into him, and yet you can't give him a run with this? You can't give him a run with this? Even if it's just for a few months, briefly, whatever? You couldn't give him a run with your championship. Why? He wasn't a world champion anywhere else. I don't quite understand that, WWE. How can you not give one of your most over guys during the New Generation era, not give them a run with this? I do not understand. And then speaking of New Generation, how about a guy that's back in WWE right now? People are saying he's better than he's ever been. Speaking of New Generation, in fact, speaking of New Generation and into the Attitude Era as well, a guy that's hotter than, a guy that's come back recently, is tag team champions with his brother, and yet during his first initial run in the WWE, and even into the Attitude Era, when he went through that identity crisis, whatever, you couldn't give Goldust a run with the title. A guy that you currently have on your roster right now. You couldn't give him a run with this. Now, people are saying, well, Brian, he's with the roster right now, so never say never. I'm not saying he's not going to probably get a run with this during the current time frame. Because if they're going to send him off in a big way, might as well do it. You know, it's the only championship he hasn't won. But my point is this. My point is this. During his first run with the company, during his first run in the mid-90s, and into the Attitude Era, you couldn't give him a brief run with this, a brief reign with this, transitional or not. You couldn't do that? I mean, come on, folks. Seriously? You couldn't give Goldust, Dustin Rhodes, a run with this. You couldn't do that. Even when you had him go through the identity crisis situation, you didn't want to give him a run. I do not understand this company. I do not understand it. Yet you give him a run as a 3 to 4 time Intercontinental Champion, and that's cool. You give him a run as a multiple-time Tag Team Champion, Booker T, now his brother, and that's cool. But yet you don't want to give him a run with the WWE Championship back when he first started, when he was hotter than anything, when he was more controversial, more talked about than probably any superstar you had at that time? What were you thinking? What were you thinking? I could never, I could not get you guys sometimes. I really could not get you guys. Honestly, I couldn't. And then, because this will help represent the Attitude Era too. And then, I know Schleg Daddy's going to flip when he hears me say this. But when you had him lose his hair, and you started having him go with the attitude of, don't piss me off. And basically you had him swinging guitars on the heads of everybody, man and woman. And you had him being escorted out to the ring by two of the most attractive, most beautiful women in the company. And as crazy as this sounds, and as flipped out as Jeff Schiegel's going to get, you couldn't at least, for a brief period of time, transitional at most, couldn't give Jeff Jarrett a run with this? You couldn't do that? Even when you knew he was getting hot in the eyes of some with this new "don't piss me off" attitude that he carried over to WCW? You couldn't just say, hey, this guy is hot right now. He's got a new attitude. You know, he's got some momentum. Let's put the belt on him, even if it's transitional. You couldn't even do that. Let him win it like, okay, let him win the belt 1 week on Raw, and then the following week or 2 weeks later, lose it on Raw or lose it on a pay-per-view. You couldn't at least give him maybe a 1 week, 2 week reign as champion. You couldn't do that. You couldn't give him that opportunity to have a 1 to 2 week reign, especially with his new attitude. I don't get it. I honestly don't get it. I honestly just don't get it, folks. You couldn't do that for him. You couldn't do that in the least. And then another guy that was part of the Federation and part of the new generation, British Bulldog, Davey Boy Smith, God rest his soul. You couldn't give this guy, as over as he was in during the Federation years, as over as he was getting during the new generation run, babyface or heel, you couldn't give him a shot at this, a run with this briefly, transitionally. You couldn't give the British Bulldog a run? I don't get it. I mean, he made events SummerSlam 92, the biggest crowd for a SummerSlam ever in the UK, wins in a classic match, and yet you can't give him a run with this? Now, I understand the whole situation behind the scenes of what happened and why he was let go. I get that. I understand that. But still, even when he came back, you couldn't give him a run with this? Or even before, you couldn't give him a run? I don't understand it. I don't get it. And then one other guy, just before I put this down and bring out the other one. Hacksaw Jim Duggan, Mr. Ho, if you will. As over as he was during the Federation years, you couldn't give him a run with this just briefly, just transitionally? I don't understand that either. He's over, he's got fans chanting, USA! And you can't give him a run just briefly or transitionally with this? And then another name, 2 other names before I put this down. Tatanka. You put the rocket ship up Chris Chavez's butt, if you will, Tatanka's butt. Push him as high as you can. Give him an almost 2-year undefeated streak. And you can't even give him a brief reign or a few months reign with this? You can't even do that? When he's at his most hottest, when he's undefeated, you couldn't even do that? And then, let's talk about the guy that ended his undefeated streak, Ludwig Borga. As crazy as it sounds, the guy had some heat on him. The guy had some momentum. And yet you couldn't put the belt on him either, just transitionally or briefly? And then another guy, crazy as it sounds, Lex Luger. You had your opportunity to put the belt on him. You were pushing him as the next Hulk Hogan, as the next All-American hero, and yet you can't put the belt on him? Yet instead you say, hey, let's have him do a count-out victory at SummerSlam against Yokozuna, have everybody celebrate as if he's won the belt, which he didn't. Let's build it up to maybe Royal Rumble or Mania, and by that time all momentum that you had for Lex dies out, and instead of having him go over Yokozuna and Mania, and then maybe drop it to Brett at the end of the night, at least saying, hey, you had maybe a few-hour run with the belt, a few-hour run as champion, you can't even do that? You can't even do that? And that was a wasted opportunity. The booking decision there, I'll tell you this, honestly, sucked. And then we get into the attitude and the ruthless aggression errors. Ruthless aggression. The late Umaga. The late Umaga, if you will. Umaga, who was undefeated for as long as he was. Eddie Fatu, if you will. You put him in 3-minute warning, you repackage him, he's Umaga, goes undefeated, and yet you can't give him a run with this just briefly. You can't give him a run with this championship just briefly. Yeah, I was there in person. I saw him lose to John Cena by small package. Okay, I saw that. It's good. But still, even afterwards, even while he was still hot, you still couldn't give him a run with this? I don't understand that. I really don't. And then you want to talk about other people that never had a run with this during the ruthless aggression era. What about Christian? Christian, who went on his own, was having some good success, if you will, had basically the essentials to be put into the main event spot, challenged for this, especially after WrestleMania 20, and yet you can't give him a run briefly with this. You just register him, regulate him to this. When he comes back, that's it. You can't give him a run with this. Now I know some people are saying, well, Brian, he's still going, he still can get it. Yeah. One little de facto on that. We only have one world champion now. That literally means for a guy like Christian, he's Intercontinental or U.S. Championship bound, unfortunately. But yeah, you still can't give him a run with this, even if you still have time to do it. I don't understand it. I really don't. And then, what else? Matt Hardy. Crazy as that sounds. Matt Hardy. You could not give Matt a run with this. You bring him back in 2005. He's got momentum on his side. He's got probably one of the best feuds of the year going on, which basically bends and blends reality and stage, reality and fiction. You have him have one of the best feuds of the year in the history of the ruthless aggression era with Edge. And you can't even have him win this just briefly or transitionally. Let me put it to you like this. If you would have allowed Matt to win this just briefly, just imagine how much sweeter and how much more personal, storyline-wise, reality-wise, it would have been for Edge, if you will, to cash in his briefcase on Matt Hardy. Imagine how much more sweeter, how much more personal that storyline would have gotten, and by blending that reality with it. Imagine how much better that would have been. Even if Matt's reign would have just been briefly, maybe for a few moments or something like that, like Daniel Bryan's was earlier this year. Imagine how much more sweeter, much more personal, much more intense that storyline would have been. But yet you don't do that. And he's probably hotter than anything at that time with the crowd. And I could still never understand that, folks. I could still never understand that. You know, I can't. I really can't understand that. And then, who else is out there? Who else? Who else have you not given a shot or run with this, even briefly, during the ruthless aggression, or even during this time frame of the Attitude, this time frame of the PG Universe era, we would be not given a shot with this belt, a run with this belt. Let's see. How about, oh, I don't know, let's say the Hurricane? Yeah, as over as he was, you couldn't give him a run with the belt? And then you were trying to push him as Gregory Helms. You couldn't give him a run with the belt even then? Just briefly? Just transitionally? And then, one of the most over guys that you had, won Money in the Bank at WrestleMania. But because of complaints from two individual superstars, or at least one in particular, you throw his chances at being your champion, your WWE champion, out the window. And I'm talking about Kennedy, Mr. Kennedy, or now known as Mr. Anderson. You couldn't give him a run with this? It's a lot of BS, folks. And then, when you're getting behind this Hall of Famer and saying, hey, let's give him one last push to show our appreciation, you couldn't even give, just briefly, Jerry Lawler a run with this, just briefly? You couldn't do that? I mean, there's so many other names I can think of as well that have been there and have been gone. Rhino, for example, you couldn't give him a run with the belt? Just briefly? You couldn't give even someone like Raven a run with the belt. Or even Tommy Dreamer. And these reigns don't have to be long reigns. They could just be brief transitional reigns. You couldn't give them at least a run with the belt, saying, hey, here's Tommy Dreamer, the last ECW champion. Oh, look what he's done. He's become WWE champion. No one ever thought that would happen. Same with Raven. Same with Rhino. You know, because why? Because they were champions of ECW? I'll never understand this company, folks. I'll never understand it. And its decisions. It's like, even if they were just brief transitional reigns, even for a day, a week, or even just like Daniel Bryan's at SummerSlam, you couldn't just at least let him have that moment? I don't get it. But to me, those are a lot of the names, past and present, that I believe WWE has failed to push, and at least for a transitional brief moment, give a run or a reign with a run with this belt, or at least a brief transitional reign with this belt. Instead, most of them at times have been regulated to this, to the World Heavyweight Championship. And no offense to the world title, it's got a great lineage, but still, WWE treated it like a joke. That's all they've done. And now we're supposed to take it seriously because it's combined with this. But still, Jeff, that's my response to your video. Let me know what you guys think about it. Comment below. Video response if you like. But that's who I believe WWE missed out on who, even for a brief transitional moment or period, could have been champions, but they never let be. Comment below. Let me know what you guys think. Peace out.